looking like breeze.
Hello, and welcome to the Anexinet Infrastructure Modernization Podcast. Here on AIM, we invite industry professionals and subject matter experts on to discuss current trends and technology topics. Today, we will be talking about intelligent automation with automation anywhere. Joining me today are Frank Kelly, VP of Transformation Architecture from Automation Anywhere, and George Carter, Director of Automation Delivery at Anexinet. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Oh, doing just
great.
fine, Chris. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Doing great.
All right, gentlemen, I appreciate your time. Let's get started with a couple of basic questions just to set the table for people. When you think about the idea of automation, in particular around what your organization does, the phrase RPA comes up a lot, Robotic Process Automation. From a very low level, what does that mean?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'll take a first pass at this, Frank, and then I'll pass it over to you. Just from my observation, when we hear the phrase RPA or Robotic Process Automation, it sounds very fancy. It sounds very powerful, and it is. But at the end of the day, it's really wrapping automation around a human task. So any kind of manual effort that is actually being engaged in from an IT perspective or even just an administrative perspective, we're talking about taking that manual effort and now wrapping it in some sort of automated process to where that manual effort is no longer required. So just keeping it very high level, that at its core is what it means. Frank?
Right. So yeah, just to build on that, George, a little bit, we've been doing this for a long time, right? And so if you asked me 5 years ago, what is RPA? And I would say RPA has been around a long time. You know, you could always go into, your Outlook program and say, send an email next Wednesday at 9 o'clock in the morning, right? So by its main definition, that's RPA, right? But what's really happened over the last couple of years is that the software packages have become much easier to use, right? So RPA now is really the ability to democratize these tools out to the business units where they can then, as George mentioned, kind of wrap automation around tasks that people are doing every day, a lot of times on their own, right? So think of it as like an Excel macro on steroids where, the steroids part is it's logging in and out of, multiple applications inside of one automation that in a lot of instances was created by somebody in the business unit, right? So it's the ability to kind of move the technology closer to where the work's being done to make the enterprise a lot more effective and efficient.
Yeah, very nice, Frank. And I just want to key in on something that Frank mentioned because he is absolutely correct. At its infancy, when we think about automation, it was always about an individual who wrote something or developed something, if you would, to fix for use case X, whatever kind of problem that they were actually facing. The problem is, how do you now take what they've done, what they have created to make their life easier, and then make that available to anyone else who's also in the exact same situation? And that's where the power of those software packages that Frank mentioned, that's really where it comes in. Being able to productize that, if you would, and make it consumable by the average person. And really, we're just at the cusp of this. It is growing by leaps and bounds.
For folks that are sitting there wondering, well, we've been talking about automation for a long time. What's the difference, right? And if we look at, the traditional opportunities for automating inside of an enterprise, it was basically get on the IT roadmap, right? And so, there's a lot of kind of friction that gets built up between the business units and the IT team because there's just not enough resources for everything to get on that roadmap, right? And so there's a lot of unmet need in the business units that can now be addressed with tools like this, right? And I would actually go a step further and say, let's let the IT teams work on the large transformative type automations, new ERP systems, new services, things like that. And let's push everything else back over to the businesses to use a tool like this, which has, light touch yet strong governance. So it's really transformative in the way it's allowed the business units to do more and also freed up the IT teams to do more, right? So it's solving a lot of problems inside the business.
And a lot of that also comes down to the fact that these RPOs or RPAs, I apologize, are much, much better at completing the task 100% perfectly and significantly faster. So for example, the one that comes to mind in my head right away is if you have a user on board, there's some type of a process that can be initiated that would automate the account creation, et cetera. And then if the user is offboarded, you have a similar process that undoes or disables all of the access and accounts that would be required. Is there a big difference between one phrase that comes up a lot is front-end automation and back-end automation? In terms of the tool sets and the way that these types of automations are structured and put together and created in an environment, is there a dramatic difference between the two? Is it a difference without a distinction? Or is there a different team that would be utilizing one versus the other?
Not necessarily. It's really a degree of complexity. So when we think about front office automation, so we're talking about those routine front office tasks, just as you mentioned there, Chris, of perhaps it's onboarding a new employee, or perhaps you're answering emails, or you're filling out some sort of form and making it available, to the large ecosystem. That's more of your front office automation. And just as Frank mentioned, there are software packages out there, Automation Anywhere being the leader of one of those, that would certainly be able to aid a client, give them that tool, all right, give them that tool, that power to be able to automate those pieces. Now, take that same approach and now let's apply it to back office automation. And now what we're talking about is automation that needs to reach out to back-end storage, back-end compute, all right, or even a hyper-converged type solution. So what's the difference in those? Well, really there is none. That same tool set that basically added power and relieved the complexity on the front end can also be now utilized to initiate those processes, those same things on the back end. Now, do we have to add some additional automation or some additional modules on the back end to kind of serve as mediators between the software tool set and, and the piece of hardware that we're dealing with? Yeah, perhaps. But as Frank mentioned, these software packages that are out today are becoming more and more advanced, more and more complex, more and more user-friendly to be able to give that customer the complete end-to-end automation experience, whether they're addressing the front-end challenges or the back end.
Hopefully what folks are seeing in the industry is that we're getting innovation at a much faster pace, right? So if we look at, RPA as a technology, right, and eventually intelligent automation, right, which is what RPA leads you into, the innovation in the packages over the last couple of years has just been huge, right? So people have always been chasing this concept of like a digital assistant, right? And so Automation Anywhere recently came out with their ARI technology and their A360 platform, which allows you, and when we talk about front office automations, right, this now allows you to, as you're sitting there doing some work, just kind of look over your shoulder and say, go do this for me while I do something else, right? And there's a digital assistant on your desktop that's doing those things for you, and it's targeted to the business unit that you work for, right? So if you work in a call center, maybe it's looking up orders for you while you talk to your customer about new innovative products that you have to offer. Or maybe it's looking up, a payment history for a vendor while you're talking to your vendor about new orders you want to place with them, right? And so this technology is coming out, at a much faster pace, especially with, Automation Anywhere's product is a true SaaS model, right? So we're constantly able, through our development process to add new features at a very fast pace. And so if we look at the technology, right, front office, back office, it's all starting to blend together with some of these new packages, right? So really, really an exciting time here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Frank, as you were talking about that blending together of front office and back office, you're absolutely correct, because that's exactly what we're seeing, to where because of the power of the tool sets that are available, as the front office is engaging in their necessary task and they're feeding that data, well, that data has to go somewhere, right? So it basically now starts to bleed into back office operations, to where now perhaps because of an order, perhaps because of the data sets that's being ingested, now they do need to grow the ecosystem, add more VMs, perhaps, for those new employees that just got onboarded, or perhaps set up a certain software stack. And so that blending together of front office, back office operations is getting closer and closer. It's getting more seamless. And that's where the excitement really comes in, because whenever you can get those two entities to work in lockstep with each other, seamless automation, then really what you're seeing here is an organization that is nimble, that is responsive to customer needs, as well as you result in happier employees, because now they're not inundated with the manual work that oftentimes is not necessarily a core part of their objective.
Absolutely. And I think where the conversation is going here, George, is, as more and more folks in the enterprise are aware of the technology, aware of the capabilities, pulling the capabilities into their business units, what we're doing is we're starting to transform the way that they think about human capital management. And where we're leading them is to this concept of, hey, I want to digitize first, right? So I have a new demand for work. I want to automate first. I want to go to this digital worker portal, right, which becomes kind of like their self-service portal for demanding digital workers. I want to look through and see all of the stuff that we've done as an enterprise and as a business unit, and I want to order my new digital worker, whether it's exactly the same as something else, or whether it is slightly different, or whether it's completely different, right? I want to get to the point where the enterprise can spin up digital workers for me, which maybe I manage directly, right? Spin up these digital workers in less time than it would take me to identify, onboard, and train a new full-time employee, right? And a North Star on that would be, I want the new digital workers in less than 2 weeks, right? And how that happens is because we've now converged all of the development that's happening, right? So the tools allow us to centralize all of the different automations, right? Whether it be, an RPA component, whether it be an API component, whether it be an AI ML component, whether it be Automation Anywhere's IQBot, which does your optical character recognition and your intelligent document processing. All of these solutions now are centralized in a single platform, and you can spin up these digital workers really, really quickly.
Absolutely. And Chris, it actually just reminded me of a nice use case to kind of highlight exactly what Frank was speaking to. In one particular instance, right, we had a client that was very desirous of being able to automate their laptop refresh program. Now, you just think about what that means. So in an organization where you have hundreds, thousands of employees, everyone has their own laptop. How do you ensure that your employees have the latest and best? How do you ensure that when that laptop has now reached end of life, you have an operation that can succinctly and responsively really replace those laptops? Well, the current problem was it was a manual behemoth. It required lots of employees to basically look in the configuration management database and see exactly the laptop, who owns it, the date of it, how long has it been in service, when is the end of life, and then start the manual process of refresh. Well, what we've been able to do is basically take all of that burden away to where you use a powerful suite of tools such as Automation Anywhere to scrape that data from the configuration management database and then send those automated alerts to the actual employee, letting them know that your laptop is due for a refresh and these are the necessary steps. And then once that's done, once again, this is that front office to back office coming closer together. But once that date has expired, then the automation actually reaches out, executes certain code to begin the laptop provisioning process. So we're talking laptops on desks that actually begin to spin up with new operating systems, as well as application stacks that are specific to that employee. And then take it to the next point, to where now you're automating actual shipping labels, getting that ready to go. And then when the laptop actually ships to site, as soon as the employee fires it up and plugs it in, that message is captured. Yes, I have a new laptop. And then through automation, close out that particular refresh ticket. All that can be done through automation with really just minimal human oversight. And that's really what we're talking about is these tools are getting more powerful, more robust, and they're able to alleviate a lot of the IT burden that has traditionally been a part of an ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely correct, George. And I think, we probably should spend a couple of minutes on some of the application use cases, because I think that's where people really get excited. And, the use case you presented, I look at use cases kind of in two buckets. What is a straightforward use of the new technology, right? And then the second is, once we have team members that really understand the technology, what are those use cases where they have these ideas going off in their head like popcorn that they never thought about before because they never really understood the technology. So kind of look at like a level 1 use case and like a level 2 use case, right? And maybe I can give a couple of examples. So, we talked about in the beginning, Chris brought up, onboarding, right? Some HR use cases, right? And it's a great place for folks to start. The work is pretty straightforward, right? Like whether it's creating an HR offer letter, right? And you just take information that comes in, you open up a template, you create the offer letter, you move through, maybe it's DocuSign that's going to manage the process for you. All that can be automated. Or maybe it's onboarding, right? So maybe it's, if I go back one step before onboarding, maybe as a manager, I put a request in for a new headcount, right? And historically, by the time you got that information loaded up to the internal and external recruiting websites, as well as getting a recruiter assigned to it, that throughput time might be 3, 4, 5 days, right? Now it's under 4 hours. So if you're on an HR team and you're being measured around how much time does it take me from when a manager puts a request in for a new headcount to when I close that, maybe by automating the front end of that, I can reduce my days open by 10, 15%, right? Or maybe on the back end, if I have somebody, let's say I have somebody retire, right? Well, I have a very short time to go through the systems and pull that employee out of all the benefit systems, right? So how many times am I continuing to pay benefits for folks that have left the company because there was a backlog, it was a queue of material that I had to get through, right? Now the bots can do that for you 24/7, right? And now you don't have to open a case with a healthcare provider and say, hey, we mistakenly paid for another 2 months of employee XYZ who left the company. Now I need a refund, right? So you eliminate a lot of those inefficiencies. And those are kind of like the level 1 opportunities that I talk about. And then these level 2 are, once RPA is very easy to learn how to use. The Automation Anywhere platform is actually the easiest in the market to learn how to use. And then once you learn how to use it, it's the easiest to create automations with. So medium complexity projects, 6 to 8 weeks to completion. And so once folks get really familiar with the technology, they get comfortable around it, they see that it works 24/7, you get 100% accuracy, they start going into what I call these level 2 type use cases, which is how do I really improve my business, right? How do I drive additional business value, right? So how do I follow up on a sale with a very targeted email that says, hey, Frank Kelly, I saw you bought the XYZ product yesterday. By the way, here are the most popular accessories. Click through here and buy at a discounted rate, right? Very high click-through rates, very high conversion rates, because now they're very targeted emails. And the folks on the sales teams now look at a tool like this and say, hey, I can create a solution over here which is going to drive more sales for me. Or, on the other side, we can look at operational efficiencies, things like, I have a distressed shipment, right? And for the distressed shipment, I have 2 or 3 days to address the distressed shipment before it comes back to my pick, pack, and ship partner, and they're going to charge me a restocking fee, and then I'm going to have to pay for shipping materials again when I figure it out and I send it out again. Well, how about we put RPA in there that picks up the case as soon as it gets created and tries to solve it for us, right? So those are some really good use cases where I'm trying to give folks an idea of just how powerful these tools can be.
Absolutely. And I think that's a wonderful breakdown of those use cases and those 2 buckets, as you mentioned there, Frank. And I think the only thing I would add to that is, as they continue in their growth, in their evolution of RPA, its power, its possibilities, that they will eventually get to that point where, man, we want to know what's next. How do we really get greater ROI out of this? How do we actually utilize this to do some pretty amazing things, especially in the back office? And that's really where Anexinet can come in, really serving as that DevOps arm to be able to bridge that gap between the powerhouse of Automation Anywhere and, of course, their back-end storage, their back-end hypervisors, whatever the case may be. But Frank, there was one more thing that I wanted to key in on what you said. You highlighted several times efficiency, and I couldn't agree with you more. But one of the things I want to highlight here to our listeners is efficiency does not mean a replacement of a human being, because that is what I hear often. Well, I don't want to embrace RPA. I don't want to embrace automation because it's going to force us into a situation to where we have to reduce headcount. And that's really not it at all. And that's not been my experience, and probably not yours too, Frank, in dealing with this for so long. In fact, it actually results in just the opposite. Now, Gartner did a study a few years ago, and this was involving not only front office operations, but also back office operations. But they determined that 80% of what these operators are engaged in are not central to their job. And 20% of what they're engaged in is what is critical. That is a powerful, powerful message, because what that essentially says is that for the average person, 80% of their day is actually spent doing mundane tasks that, yeah, it's important, but is it really impactful to the organization? And it's not. It's the 20%. That's where automation, that's where RPA comes in, is it basically takes that 80%, it automates it, it gives you that warm, fuzzy, if you will, feeling that that's being taken care of, so that really you can focus in on the 20% that is truly impactful to the business unit and to the organization.
Right. I think you hit on a lot of great points there, George. And I can talk from my experience, right? So here at Automation Anywhere, as essentially like a field CTO, I've met with, probably 200 plus customers in the last year. And in my previous career, where I ran one of the biggest intelligent automation programs in the world, working for, one of the largest high-tech manufacturing companies in the world, we had conversations like this all the time, right? And so, we would go to teams, right? And it's really double-edged, right? Like you have management teams that say, hey, listen, I don't really want to disrupt these folks. I don't want to make them feel threatened because, their job might be at risk. And we talk to them because RPA is different, right? It's different than a traditional IT automation, right? It's not like with IT on a Monday morning, something new goes live and 400 people don't have anything to do, right? This is, we're automating the work and it's pockets of folks. It's 6 people here, 20% of 10 people here, 2 people over here. And if you look at your organization, as the good managers do, right? If you look at your organization and you look at it at the beginning of the year, you have 100% of your headcount. And then there's 3 things that affect that during the year, right? You have attrition, right? So I had a really big team in Bangalore, India. My attrition rate was never under 10%. You have attrition, you have organic growth, and then you have new programs that you're going to be asked to stand up. So as we automate this work using RPA, right, as these business units find these opportunities and automate it, those folks that get freed up can fill one of those buckets, right? Because each organization is going to have between 5 and 10% the original headcount from the beginning of the year that they're going to have to find new folks for, right? And in a lot of cases, the folks that are being moved around are being moved into more impactful roles that the folks just like better, right? So it's like, hey, they went from a job where they were, the example I mentioned earlier, right? They're just creating offer letters every day. Right now, maybe they get freed up and we stand up a new service that's called HR Chat. And so what they're doing is they're chatting with employees every day, answering their HR questions, right? Relieving their anxiety and improving employee net promoter scores. Because now instead of an employee getting an answer 2 or 3 days later because they have to open an HR case, now they have a real live person that they can have a chat with, right? So that's how we talk to folks, and then they get it, right? And then they realize, okay, this is really win-win for everybody. It's win-win for the company. We're getting a little bit more efficient. We're driving more value, and it's win-win for the employees because, they're getting jobs that are much more satisfying, right?
I just wanted to go back a little bit to talk about the unified platform aspect of this. One thing, especially companies that are either not doing automation at all or not doing it at a sophisticated level, let's say, you could have a system administrator that says, I don't need some third-party automation tool to spin up a user. I've got a shell script or a PowerShell script that does that. And that could go through a number of the other use cases. And the immediate problem that I see is twofold. One is there's no monitoring around those jobs. It's still effectively somebody doing it. They've simplified some of the button clicking and the approval process, but the task itself is still effectively a manual one, meaning there's no oversight, there's no reporting, and there's no communication between one section of automation and another in the various use cases that you were talking about. Can you just talk a little bit about the platform and how monitoring and management of jobs takes place in a way that differentiates it from other tools or people just building something from a shell script and running on their workstation?
Sure. So what we're really talking about here is the evolution of the shadow IT teams in the business units, right? Because we have historically you have IT that has a lot of resource constraint. I've been in those IT organizations, right? Reported into CTOs, had visibility to budgets, and the budgets are cut every year, right? Every year, they're always saying you have to do more with less, right? So there's just not enough resources to address all the automation needs of the business, right? And sometimes the business doesn't really ask to have all their needs met, right? Because maybe the automation opportunity is too small and the IT team would never work on it, right? Maybe the process is too complex and it's very hard for the business unit teams to put a spec together that's sufficient enough for the IT team to create the automation, right? To create the solution that they want. Maybe a lot of what they want automated are really quote unquote sins of the business units, right? And they don't want to publicize the fact that, their error rates are really high in a certain area, which would benefit from automation tremendously. But the managers are just saying, hey, listen, we don't want other people seeing that stuff, right? So there's a lot of opportunity there, but not a lot of resources to get the work done. And so you have these kind of shadow IT teams that pop up. But along comes an Automation Anywhere platform, right, which has, as I mentioned earlier, as I like to mention, is light touch but strong governance, right? So a lot of visibility to the IT teams on what's running in the ecosystems. We have, a centralized control room. We have monitoring tools. We have dashboards where folks can see what's going on. And so it really allows, what the real breakthrough here is, now we have a digital worker program, right? So a manager now has their human workers that they're managing, and they have their digital workers that they're managing, and they're monitoring them just as they do the human workers, right? And the Automation Anywhere platform tools allow them to do that, right? So we have things like Bot Insight, which allows them to pull certain variables out of the automations and move them right to a dashboard. If we look on the front end, before we even get started, Automation Anywhere now owns Fortress IQ, right? Which is an intelligent process analyzation tool, which is pulling all the information together on what your workers are doing and providing some AI-based analytics to you that says, hey, this is how you should do the process going forward. And oh, by the way, this is the portion of it that can be automated, right? So the platform is the most comprehensive in the marketplace, but again, has light touch and strong governance, right? So I mentioned, I ran the intelligent automation team for one of the largest high-tech manufacturing companies in the world, right? So we were able to pull reports out of our RPA program and send them over to the centralized IT teams that own the domain applications so that they could see, hey, what do we have that's running against our applications? And oh, by the way, we're going to do an upgrade to some of these domain applications, and we can build a certain amount of these back into those applications, right? So it's really becomes a feeder system for them, and they feel really comfortable around the product and the way its governance is set up. So it's really a success for everybody in the enterprise.
Yep, absolutely, Frank, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I was thinking as you were speaking to that phrase "shadow IT," just how frowned upon that is in the industry, and rightfully so. IT does, of course, has its place, and it's there for a very important reason. It's been my experience, though, whether a business unit leader likes to recognize it or not, and this is one of those truth moments, automation is taking place in his business unit. It is. Whether it is an employee who has wrote a script to help them to be more efficient, or perhaps to have just some simple cut and paste things that they're doing, they are in effect embracing that automation. So why not wrap some governance around that and empower those employees with a reliable tool set that will help them to execute that automation safely and effectively, and also give the business unit or the organization unit leader the oversight that they need to keep those processes from going awry and causing damage or disruptions to the overall organization.
Right, absolutely. We see it all the time. This is a way, the RPA program, the Automation Anywhere platform is a way to kind of pull that back in and say, okay, we understand the reasoning for why shadow IT pops up, right? As again, the IT resources are so constrained, we can't respond to all of the needs of the business units. And the business units are under a lot of pressure, right? From, the CFO, the presidents of their divisions, whoever it is, saying, hey, listen, it's the beginning of the year, I want to read out on, how are you going to improve your operation for the next year, right? And without access to a lot of automation, it's really difficult to transform your business unit. And so that's why shadow IT pops up. But now we're at the point where we can pull it back in, right? So RPA, as I mentioned, medium complexity projects, 6 to 8 weeks for completion. And that's pulling it through the ideation pipeline, doing the documentation, creating the coding, doing the validation testing, and going through launch. Now you can set that up. You have your governance in place. You can move the tools out to the shadow IT teams and say, hey, listen, we really want you to start using these tools now going forward. It still is a democratized technology. You're still going to have the power that you have today to create automations, but it just has, a light touch, but very strong governance around it.
Hey, Frank, if you could expound, if you don't mind, how automation anywhere can help in call center operations, because that topic keeps coming up more and more, especially in the current mode that a lot of organizations are having to operate in under our current COVID environment. Could you expound on that, of really how it can help in those areas?
The key metric in a call center is the average handling time, right? So what is the average handling time of a call? And then what is the customer net promoter score, right? The CNPS. Those are the two big measures of a call center, right? And so if customer is unhappy, the net promoter score is really low. Usually unhappiness is driven by a higher than expected average handling time. So everything is connected in the call center. The other challenge in the call centers is there is a huge attrition rate because people just don't feel successful. They don't feel like they're being really successful in their jobs. The line they probably use the most in the call center after hello, may I help you is, I apologize, but my computer is slow today, right? Covering for the fact that the average handling time is higher than what the person on the other end of the line is expecting. And so what we really do, what Automation Anywhere is a 360 platform, its ARI platform does, is it simplifies your agent experience. So ARI is, think of it as your digital assistant, right? I want to look over my shoulder and I want to say, go do this while I do something else. Customer calls up and says, I want to get an update on my order. Where's my order? So immediately the call center agent will click on the button on ARI, customized buttons created by citizen developers or shadow IT in their area that says, okay, it's an order update button. Click on the order update button. I put the order number in, I hit enter, and ARI goes and does all the work for you, right? Looks up in however many systems it has to look information up to get a complete picture of what the status of the order is. And maybe the order is shipped, but hasn't been received by the customer yet. So ARI will go out to the carrier website and pull that information in together again and give a complete picture and bring that information back to the call center agent who can then talk to the customer about it. And so it does it faster. And maybe while it's doing that work, the call center agent is actually talking to the customer about something else, right? Maybe there's an upsell opportunity. Maybe there's some other questions that the customer has, right? And in that case, maybe the call center agent is kicking off a number of ARI instances to do multiple things in parallel where the call center agent would have had to do them in series, right? And stretch the call out, increase the average handling time, reduce the customer net promoter score, right? And so it allows you to pull more information in together quicker to do that, right? Job satisfaction goes up, customer happiness goes up, average handling time goes down, right? We routinely have examples where we put A360 and the ARI digital assistant in the call center and we drive average handling time down up to 60%, right? So huge improvements there. And in a lot of cases, we have worked with other software providers to embed the Automation Anywhere technology right in their software. So it's very seamless now. It's a very seamless use of the technology in the call center technology. So
thank you, Frank. And if I can just build on that, that's the reason for the question, because in a lot of the cases that we've seen, they have embraced Automation Anywhere to help them turbocharge, I'm going to use that term loosely, their front office operations, right? That call center operation stack. And then once they have all these metrics, all the data, now they want to do something with it. They want to do something, perhaps it's a predictive analytics engine, or perhaps it's to execute process X or Y, whatever the case may be. And that's typically where we get pulled in as an Anexinet, is to help in those areas to really add that additional layer of automation on top of a powerful software package. So what I would say now, as far as just a call to action, it's a wonderful conversation here with Frank, but as I'm thinking about everything that we've discussed so far, I'm thinking about how can a customer really embrace everything, right? Because we've said a lot, but I think it's really regardless of where they're at in their automation journey. Perhaps they have an idea, perhaps they have a concept of, I believe automation can help me in my organization. Well, we can come in and help with that assessment phase to really make that an empirical statement that yes, it can help you. Yes, it can have this amount of time savings. It can have this ROI to your business unit. And then perhaps they are not at that phase. They already have some RPA or some automation processes that are already in flight and they see the benefits of that. Well, we also can come in and do that reevaluation of the existing automation tool sets, right? To see if they are indeed getting that valuable ROI, to see where improvements can be made, to see where adjustments, right, perhaps needed, or perhaps even just a compressing of various automation elements into a single particular powerhouse tool set so that they have a single lever to pull versus many. And then I also think about the ones who are more advanced, right? They already have perhaps front office, the back office automation. They're even tying it into their back end hyperconverged NAS solution in the background. But we also can help in that area with actually adding those missing elements or perhaps just redesigning the whole thing. And then finally, but last but not least, you have the ones who, you know what, I love the concept, I love the idea, I want it, but I do not want to be a DevOps engineer. That's not my use case. That's not my business. That's not my passion. Well, we also can help in that area too, where we can come in and really help you design that complete end-to-end solution and take it as far as you want to take it. Maybe it's really high level, just front office type stuff, or maybe you want to go full in front office, back office, and everything that it would involve. We can help with that. And once again, the thing that we love to leverage and utilize is Automation Anywhere, because it is a powerful tool set. That would be my call to action to the listeners. Frank?
Yeah, I totally agree, George. I think that really pulled it together and summed it up. What I would stress to folks is we're now on a new journey. New technology is being introduced faster than ever before. Compute speed is really high. Compute costs are really low. So for those customers that haven't started the journey yet, you have to start, right? Because there are companies in your industry that are doing it. And if you're not reaping the rewards of it, your financial measures, you're going to fall behind. You're going to be below average in the industry. Engaging with a company like Anexinet ensures success. Choosing a platform such as Automation Anywhere, we have thousands and thousands of customers that are doing great things with it. And we would like to ensure that future customers are getting that benefit as well. So it's a really good partnership with Anexinet. The partnership there is as strong as anybody else.
Very nice. Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And on that note, I think that's a great place to end. So George, Frank, thank you very much for your time.
Welcome, Chris. Nice to meet you guys.
Yep. Thank you for having us.
All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.
This has been the Anexinet Infrastructure Modernization Podcast, a production of Anexinet. Subscribe for free through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite listening app. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow us on social media, visit us online at anexinet.com, or contact us at info@anexinet.com. Anexinet, empowering what's next.